Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. We're here to talk about how to profit predictably with Wilde.ai. That's Wild with an E.ai. We're here with Clint Dunn, who has worked at places like Afterpay and HairStory, and we're going to find all about data and growth and making better predictions about customer behavior, LTV, churn, all these things that we need to know or need to know better, or maybe just have forgotten about, need to be re-educated. So Clint, glad to be speaking with you.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. It's a great intro. I don't know if we even need the rest of this. You kind of nailed it all.
Right. I mean, we have the Cliff Notes or the Clint's Notes, maybe. I don't know. So as far as like the solution you have this really cool company, this cool tool. What is it? Who's it for? What does it do?
Yeah, we work mostly with retail and e-commerce companies. And we go in, we take a little bit of data from them, and then we make a bunch of predictions about how their customers are going to behave in the future, mostly focusing on future lifetime value. So how much money is each individual customer going to spend in the future? And then what's the probability that each customer comes back? And the basic idea is that with those two kind of fundamental blocks of information, you can make a whole lot of decisions on how to engage and behave with customers, from customer service to email marketing to paid ads audiences. Finance teams use it. So trying to be the kind of foundational understanding of what customers are going to do.
I love it. And it's always fun to jump into the sort of ideas about like e-commerce and big data and artificial intelligence, because there's always so many fun stories. Like you hear about, like, I think Walmart, when there's a tornado coming up, they stock a lot of Pop-Tarts, which like intuitively you wouldn't guess. Or there's things like Target sent some advertisements about like cotton balls to some like teenage girl who was secretly pregnant, and somehow the
Yeah.
Target advertisement gave away to her dad that she was pregnant. And just there's all these like cool things. And like maybe like a year or two ago, I was talking to this guy, and he was like, look, all it's about is you have your lifetime value, and then you have your cost to acquire a customer, and you just make money in the middle. And I'm like, that's the simplest thing I've ever heard. And I can't believe that we haven't thought of it that way. But then when you combine it with what you have of like this lifetime customer value and like what you can do to maximize, then it makes the numbers more predictable and less stressful and less scary. And it seems like a place that we all want to be. And so with like this tool you have, I'm sure that there's a lot of like weird interfacing, right? Like people talk about things like, like the data warehouses, or they have all this like AWS stuff set up. So if someone out there says, okay, I'm an e-commerce company, what are sort of like the prerequisites for you and your tool and your team in order to benefit from this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're mostly built on top of data warehouses: Snowflake, BigQuery, S3, you name it, and we can kind of connect to it. It's kind of becoming a big trend, right? Like GA4 is now connecting into BigQuery. I think Klaviyo is going to be connecting with their new CDP into a lot of data warehouses. And so we're still at the early days of a lot of e-commerce companies relying on and building their own data warehouses. But increasingly, I think this is going to be really, really common. And the whole benefit of it is that you have access to all of your data in perpetuity. Whereas if you just push things into your CRM, or you just rely on Shopify, you have all these like migration risks, kind of data permanence. If they change the APIs on you or change the plan that you're on, you're going to lose access to all that data. So a lot of the companies that we work with right now are a little bit on the larger side because they're these early adopters of data warehouses. But again, the benefit is that when we take data from them, they have full control over the data that they're showing us and providing access to. And then we're able to write all of our predictions straight back to their warehouse, which means they have full control over where they want to send it, which destinations, how they want to display it to the marketing team, for example. As you said, like there are all these examples of using data in really complex ways. What we're trying to do is take the complexities of actually calculating that information and take that away from people, so they don't need to think about it, but they get the actual actionable insights from it. It's kind of a tongue twister.
Yeah, it's a tongue twister, but it's a thing we need, right? To be able to use all this data without having to sift through the complexity. You hear about how important it is to have those KPIs or those dashboards or for things to be real time. That way it can be simple. That way you can make those decisions and you can benefit from your data the same way that like Google and Amazon and Facebook and all these huge companies, you hear about how just the data is so important. And so you mentioned that you work with large companies. So like, what is the right fit? Like if someone out there says, okay, I'm an e-commerce company, what size do they need to be? Are there any like niches, industries that are like yes and no? Like how does someone know if they're a fit for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're pretty good with most businesses. If you're selling direct to consumers, the model does pretty darn well at predicting customer behavior. It's flexible enough to take in the information and make accurate predictions. Really, the kind of prereq when I say large companies is mostly about that data warehouse. So, a smaller company out there that has a data warehouse, still a really great fit for us. We typically need about a year and a half of data to make accurate predictions. We can do predictions with less. We just are a little bit less accurate.
Fair enough. So they need to have that data warehouse and then not required, but ideally a year or year and a half of data to have enough to chew on. And so you're mentioning a little bit about some of the predictions that you make. So do you have any like fun stories in that category to tell us about like surprises or just like cool things you've innovated as far as using this tool?
Yeah, for sure. So, first customer that I signed on was like just a few weeks after I'd started building this, and they were a great design partner with us. And we connected to their data. We started making some predictions, and we found that our model was off in its predictions by like 34%. So horribly inaccurate. I was kind of questioning why I was doing this whole thing. I just left my job. So we started digging into like why was the model saying that they should have made so many more predictions than these customers actually did. Turns out that this company had accidentally canceled like 25% of their subscriptions, and they didn't know it, despite having a bunch of dashboards and alerts and things like that through all their tools. They had no idea that they canceled a huge portion of their subscriptions. And so because we were able to flag that they were underperforming relative to where they should have been, they then were able to identify those customers, send them emails, turn their subscriptions back on, and they recovered, a couple six figures worth of revenue.
And is it safe to say that a lot of these companies you deal with have this kind of low hanging fruit, like an easy win they can have? Because like you're reminding me, like I have this client where I think he's making like 3.5 million a year with like 12 employees. And he was telling me like he was losing like 10,000 a day in like failed credit cards, and he got it down to like 2,000 a day. And I was just like,
Yeah.
it seems like it's a real like hole in the business. So is this like it's like a common thing, like just like there's something that's been like just nagging and could maybe not easily be fixed, but like just a huge gaping hole in the business sometimes?
Yeah, I think it's pretty similar to what you were saying just a minute ago, which is like we're taking tools and approaches that huge companies are using, like Amazon and Walmart, and then we're distributing it down to companies that typically wouldn't have access to these kind of data science approaches. So when you're able to do that, that's a pretty powerful tool in your hands. And so there's typically some pretty obvious things. A little bit philosophical here, but like a lot of times when we think about a churned customer, we think about a customer who hasn't come back in 60 days or 90 days or something like that. But in the e-commerce world, your best customers purchase like once a day or once a week. They're quite extreme, but these are huge value customers. I see this in all the businesses that we work with. And those customers, you wouldn't want to wait, 60 or 90 days or 120 days to engage with them again if you're concerned about them not coming back. And so our model, one of the cool things is it gets down to that like individual level. And so it would understand, okay, Clint purchases, every 2 days. He hasn't purchased in like 6 or 7 days. It's now going to start getting a little bit worried about me. And then that can be a trigger for you to send an email. And, we work with companies where their customer service team reaches out individually because I'm an extremely high value customer. We want to get on the phone with that customer and see what their issues are and if there's anything we can solve. So, yeah, it's usually some low hanging fruit, and it really depends on like what the business is and kind of what your goals and ideas about it are. But almost always there's something pretty simple, even if it's just like tuning your win back flow to be a little bit more time sensitive.
What kind of e-commerce are people buying like every couple of days? Because many times you think of e-commerce like, maybe there's like a supplement or something where there's like an auto ship
Yeah,
once a month, but like who's buying every day? Like what are these industries?
I it's shocking to me every time. Like you do see it in supplement. I was at HairStory. We were a beauty company. It's kind of a little bit similar purchase patterns usually to supplement because it's a consumable product. Um, yeah, and I mean we would have people that would spend thousands and tens of thousands of dollars on the product every year. I see a lot in fashion brands as well. The thing about e-commerce is for most brands, 70 to 90% of their customers aren't valuable and therefore are not profitable. It's really that like 20 or so percent that you need to focus on that are going to bring the most value, that are going to bring the most profit. And so identifying those customers as early as possible is the whole key to like building your business profitably.
I love it. Well, 80-20 rule, right? Where they say there's 80% of your customers, like maybe they are needed because you need to like, get your traffic from somewhere and like walk them up. But then that 20%, the top 20% is responsible for 80% of your revenue. And that's one of those things like, it's like the Fibonacci sequence, right? It shows up just naturally in all kinds of data. And it's always fun and exciting even to kind of take the preconceived notions and then say like, well, is this really true? And then try an experiment and look at the data and be like, well, see, you thought you thought this superstition this whole time. And when we compare the data and look at this and like, you're reminding me of like early on with marketing when you'd always hear like, oh, only email your customers every 90 days or things like that. Or like, don't try to, if someone signs up for your list, don't sell to them for the first 5 or 10 days. And I thought, this seems like really outdated, old-fashioned marketing. And sometimes I try some of these things, sign up, and then here's a thing to buy, and some percent would buy it. And for a while I emailed every day, and then there were that bottom 80% that dropped off, but the true fans that remained, it was like when I looked at the numbers, I was like, I'm making way more money just by emailing every day. And so that's it's fun to think about, right? It tickles the brain a little bit to be like, well, there's things that maybe you subconsciously do just because you feel like you're supposed to. But then if you kind of look at things in a little bit of a different perspective, and then you do things differently, then you can have some really amazing results. And so, you mentioned before about kind of fixing the low-hanging fruit, the hole in the business. Is there anything kind of just like a wild and crazy or like cutting edge story where you did something like super risky or wacky with one of these companies? Anything just like super weird coming to mind?
Yeah, so my favorite one is a fashion brand that we work with. And they have a bunch of retail stores. It's kind of women's luxury fashion, and they have a bunch of retail stores, and we made predictions about their retail customers and who we thought would come back and how valuable they were. And I'd never heard of this before, but it's a thing called clienteling, which kind of luxury stores do, which is they actually engage personally with customers of the brand. And so they used our predictions to identify which customers were most likely to churn at that moment and were high value. And their retail associates were doing clienteling, basically calling and texting these people manually. And we ended up raising the average order value for these returning customers or these churning customers by 50% in like a 2-month period. And so, yeah, just like massive, massive difference when you know who you should be reaching out to and when. Pretty awesome results there. That was one I wouldn't have guessed somebody would do, but was pretty excited to see the results.
And that is an interesting just like lesson to think about. Like there's for sure people in our customer database that we need to be engaging with more in a lot of ways, and maybe in a lot of non-scalable ways. And like there's been times when I said, can we send some direct mail? Can we make some phone calls? And then I'd have someone else on my team be like, well, it'll cost too much. But then it seems like the solution is, well, identify that top 20% or like the top whatever percent, and then just go after those people. That way you can break even, or you can make some money on that and just be a little more focused, targeted, strategic. And so as far as just like Wild AI and what it does, is there like a list of like features and benefits, or just if someone says, okay, what's the A to Z of it? What's like the 3-minute sales pitch? Like what's kind of the whole explanation of Wild.ai?
For now, it's pretty simple. We're going to be expanding products and making a bunch of recommendations and predictions. For now, we're primarily focused on predicting how much people are going to spend in the future and the probability that someone will come back and purchase again. There are a few other little things that we're currently doing, but I think that's really the pitch that resonates with folks right now. It's so fundamental to identifying customers, when we should be reaching out to them, what we can offer them, right? Like what's the discount amount, setting CAC targets, things like that. And so, yeah, we're getting really good traction with those kinds of conversations. And so we're leaning into those metrics right now.
Awesome. Well, you're very focused, right? You say, here's the exact problem that we want to solve, which is to increase that or predict that lifetime customer value. And that way we can focus on that subgroup and get them to where we want to go and expand and grow the business. And so you've had these like different kind of careers, right? We worked at Afterpay and like the hair company and the fashion stuff. And now you're in Wild. Do you have any sort of like personal entrepreneurial lessons that you want to share with us in these final minutes here?
Oh man, I think it's just keep trying stuff and follow your passions. I've done a bunch of crazy stuff that was never really intended to be a big business. I've done for a while, me and a friend put like heart rate monitors on horses, racing horses, and we're doing analytics for them. I've done like composting with worms. Yeah, I've done like a bunch of kind of crazy stuff, and it was just fun. And I think Wild is kind of in the same vein. I enjoy it. I think it's a really important problem. I think it's a huge problem, but at the end of the day, I'm just having a bunch of fun.
I love it. And I think there's no other better approach, right? Have fun, and then your tool is called Wild with an E, and it does pay to be wild and to embrace the randomness as long as you finish what you start, right? And because it's one thing to have that entrepreneurial ADD and say, well, I've got like 52 different ideas, but if you say, well, I'll pursue this weird and crazy thing and I'll be curious and get to my proof of concept and see where it goes, then that is kind of just embracing this crazy world we are living in, where we're approaching the singularity and AI is taking over and everything that comes with that. And so if someone wants to take the next step here, and if they want to profit predictably with this predictive analytics engine that drives e-commerce ROI, is Wild.ai the proper place to go? Is there a different special page?
Wild.ai is the perfect place to go. Also send me an email, Clint at Wild, CLINT at Wild, WILDE.ai. Mention the show. We'd be happy to run some of these predictions for free. We can do a big audit and tell you exactly what's going on with your business and the customer base kind of health that you have.
Fabulous. And so if you're out there in podcast land, if you've been intrigued and enticed this whole conversation, you see, I got to the end and I've already got some ideas and I want to contact Clint and have him and his team run that for me and kind of give me a taste of what is possible, then the website is WILDE.ai. And then the email address was one more time?
Clint at Wild.ai. So CLINT.
Perfect. Okay. I wasn't sure if there was like Clint something after that. So Clint at Wild.ai is that email address. And as we completely close the book and wrap up our conversation here, Clint, do you have anything like sound bitey for us? Do you have a favorite quote, moral lesson book? Anything come to mind is just like a real tiny final piece of advice just to really blow this thing up?
Yeah, I think if people want to learn more about kind of our philosophy and what we're doing, Peter Fader's books are fantastic. I think the quote that I would summarize his philosophy and our philosophy is there's no such thing as an average customer. So definitely go check his stuff out. It's pretty illuminating and world changing on how you want to think about your customers and engage with them.
Amazing. I love it. There's no such thing as an average customer. And if you want to discover those non-average customers, the above the above the line customers there to really focus on, then check out wilde.ai, WILDE.ai, and we will see you there. And thank you, Clint, for being a lot of fun, telling us some cool stories and teaching us some things. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.